Charlie Arnott, we're live, my friend. Welcome.
Thank you, Paul. Lovely to be here.
Rather than asking who the fuck is Charlie Arnott, I thought we might...
Can we swear?
Well, we can swear as much as you want,
That's
man.
great.
You know, we've got a lot of cockies and different people listening to this show, but yeah, we had the two guys from Mary's Burgers on, so Jake and Kenny. Within 2 minutes, they went to the C-bomb. That upset a couple of people.
Yeah, no,
so
fair.
we'll try and keep it a little bit cleaner than that. God bless you, Jake and Kenny. But you're just back from New York, and, you know, that classic, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. I thought it'd be a really good segue into who you are and what you do by explaining why you're over in New York.
Paul, I won an award a few weeks ago at the Delicious Produce Awards, and it was sponsored by Thankful for Farmers, a charity that's an initiative that's just been about to be launched tomorrow, actually, at Chiswick, Matt Moran's restaurant there. And as part of that award, and it was for innovation, community and sustainability. And as a part of that award, they sent me to New York to, represent the charity there, learn some things at Cornell University, which was one of the world's leading agricultural universities. And we looked at the food science department, animal science, plant science. So that was sort of looking at the research that's available and could be possible in the future. And we had the inaugural global council, Thankful for Farmers Global Council meeting. And Thankful for Farmers is all about, it has a couple of different angles. It's basically a charity that raises money to then provide funds to farmers and associated businesses to transition to better practices, essentially. So it's identifying that the environment is struggling, that we need to do better for the environment. So it partners with brands to generate funds to then provide to farmers. Whether it's to transition to regenerative agriculture, develop a project, universities might seek funding for research projects, and it's to sort of unify the industry as well, and also to help join and reconnect essentially people with their food and farmers. So it's a sort of a three-pronged attack, and so that's why I went and I emceed a gala dinner there on one of the evenings, and they had 120 interesting, influential people there.
Powerful people, as I understand.
Totally.
We had Kim on the show earlier this year, and she's incredible. But everyone from the United Nations through to Matt Moran, I'm assuming, but some other enormously influential philanthropists and businessmen,
universities, government, a few Aussies there. It was great, and I really had to pinch myself there at one point because I was in a room with those people on Fifth Avenue, Rockefeller Centre, some busted ass cocky from Australia, emceeing. It was lovely. It was fantastic. I met so many wonderful people, and a big shout out to Kim and Mike at Thankful for Farmers, who are doing an amazing job, and they've poured everything into this. So
literally,
totally,
literally packed up their house and their 5 kids and moved to New York.
Put it all in,
inspiring people. So the criteria for, I'm assuming it was all farms in Australia that were part of the awards. How or why did your farm get selected?
I don't know. I think, well, look, I was involved with the Produce Awards last year, and I guess I've had an association with them, Lucy Allen and Darren, your Darren, who sort of nominated me last year. So we've had an association for 12 months or more.
Which product was it? Because
it was for our
lambs, beef,
lamb, beef, and pork,
and pork. Okay.
So it was for our lamb, and then I guess I was on their radar. They came down to Hanamino at Boorowa, our farm, to take some footage for the awards last year.
Where's the farm? Victoria.
Boorowa, sort of an hour and a half. Paul, you don't know where Boorowa is?
I'm just challenging you, man. I can't even say Boorowa, man.
Boorowa. It was Boorowa once upon a time. They changed it. They decided Boorowa.
I did watch a video of it, and it looks stunningly beautiful. But for those that aren't familiar with the great country of Australia, give some
context,
particularly for international people, between Sydney and Melbourne. Where does it lie?
It's if you go from Sydney to Melbourne, it's about 4 hours out of Sydney and sort of southwest. So it's about an hour and a half north of Canberra.
Yeah.
So it's southwest slopes of New South Wales. It's undulating to hilly sort of terrain, Mediterranean climate. We have mixed species, pasture introduced and native. We've got plenty of native habitat which we keep planting trees, exotic species and native species, to increase habitat and shelter for stock, tree lines, and retaining moisture, all sorts of reasons why we've been involved with land care for 30 years. I think Boorowa was the second land care group to establish in Australia in 1989, so it's having its 30th year.
Yeah, well, did your old man start the farm? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he started his career in the biscuit factory at Arnott's in Homebush.
Wow.
My grandfather, his father, was general manager there for many years.
The antithesis of beef, perhaps.
Yeah.
From heavily processed biscuits to God's superfood.
Oh, no, Paul, they're all natural. We went from biscuits to beef, really, was the journey. And so Dad, he did 8 years in the factory, and his mother was a farmer, grew up at Moree.
Yeah, wow.
The place called Binnaguy.
Cotton farmers there, yeah.
Well, not back then, sheep.
Really?
Sheep and cattle, yeah, no cotton then. And then at a place called Yambergan up in Durrumbandi in Queensland. So he had it in his blood. And whilst he, I think, enjoyed the 8 years at the factory, and he was...
the Arnott's factory, you mean?
The Arnott's factory, yeah. He was... I guess he was doing his apprenticeship, and he started down the bottom. His one of his first jobs was sweeping the sugar off the floor.
What do you do an apprenticeship in, bakery or?
Yeah, I guess it's bakery food science is a part of it as well.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah,
yeah.
And so, Mum used to say, or still does say that when they were courting, and people would say, who you dating? And she'd say, well, it's the guy who sprinkles the coconuts on ice Vovos, which he literally did do. That was his job, one of his jobs.
Iconic ice Vovos. Yeah. And that worked. That closed the deal.
That's it.
Got your mum over the line.
That's it. Plenty of biscuits on tap. So 8 years there, but he had a hankering for the bush. Having worked on those properties in his youth, and it's school holidays and so on. And so he moved up to Yambergan, near Durrumbandi, before getting married. Actually, I think Mum and Dad met, and then he pretty much took off straight away. So, and then they met, but they were married 6 months later. They moved up there, had a few years there, then moved to Boorowa in 1970, and started farming there. And Boorowa, and it still is today, a very mixed farming sort of a situation. That country lends itself to sheep, cattle, crops, and that's what we did. Yeah. We literally took cattle, short-horn cattle from Durrumbandi, Yambergan down to Boorowa. The herd, the Yambergan stud, it still exists at Narrabri now. The Manchie family, who are our cousins, have that stud, and so we took a third of that stud back in 1969, 1970. Took it to Boorowa, and off we went.
And siblings?
Yeah, brother Mark. And he's a couple of years older than
Is
me.
he on the farm too?
No, he's in Sydney.
He's in Sydney.
Yeah, no, he wasn't sort of interested in the farming game. Yeah, so it really, and I always was. I wasn't going to do anything else.
Interesting, isn't it, how you get two siblings that are interesting, I suppose. We all do tend to be different to our siblings, but particularly people growing up on the farm, they tend to be, I love this, or this is madness.
This is not. Yeah, I think he enjoyed it, but he was, he's very creative, and which I guess when he was at school wasn't. He had a bit of a hard time because he was creative. I went to a school that was not necessarily embracing of
creative,
arty sort of people.
Yeah, well, that was the era. Yeah.
That's right.
Where'd you go to boarding school? Probably?
Boarding school, 10 years of boarding school.
Yeah, where did you go?
Tudor House for 4 years.
Yeah,
which was just a dream.
Tudor House is Melbourne.
Moss Vale.
Yeah.
So little prep school.
Moss Vale down here,
just down the road. Yeah.
Near Frensham. You chase Frensham girls around the block.
That's right. Yeah. Gibgate back in those days, the young ones. So 4 years there, and then 6 years at King's.
Yeah, nice.
So
of rural boarding school. Yeah, beautiful school.
It is, absolutely. And look, I thrived there. It was tough, like most boarding schools back then. Yeah. And probably still is. Many more day boys there now. So there's been a shift in the sort of the proportions of day boys and boarders for a number of reasons. But
money.
Yeah, I think, and
Yeah.
just
Flexibility.
People
Well,
can
I went to
travel.
Joey's and it was 100% boarding.
That's
and,
right.
Yeah, and
You
now I've
guys
got-
used to put your football shoes in the chapel on
in the
Friday
chapel,
nights.
pray for the boots, and it seemed to work a treat, man. We continue to win. They won the footy again this year.
Did they?
Yeah, they did at long last. They're getting their mojo
I'm not sure
back.
if I even ever beat a Joey's team. To be
Yeah,
honest,
yeah.
I think about it.
In cricket, you would have for sure. I can only assume that in the region there are a mixture of sustainable farming practices and less sustainable farming practices. I'd love to get your explanation because I think a lot of people, particularly non-rural people, and you talk about, what Thankful are doing, this connection between the land and particularly our city folks. Can you just, if we start with the worst of it and work through to, your biodynamic practices, but can you just explain for people what the strict definition of factory farming is?
Well, I guess my definition is, one definition at least, is producing animals, and from a factory point of view, I mean, I consider hydroponic tomatoes factory type farming because anything that is vastly removed from the way nature works, so we're talking about animals in sheds for long periods of time without access to clean water or sunshine or grass.
Yep.
That's not a very natural way to grow anything. And the same goes for growing plants. So, what we do is we work with nature. So anything that's not working with nature, anything that essentially battles nature or is using, I mean, there was a point in time many years ago where I reflected on what I did, and I used to kill a lot of stuff.
In terms of hunting?
No, more every day I woke up and I was going to go out and kill something, as in herbicides, pesticides, fungicides,
got it. Yep.
And I was contributing to potentially the illness of not just the animals under my responsibility, but people. I mean, the food I was producing, actually I didn't even think about it as food back then. I was thinking it was a commodity. I was a commodity farmer, which is a lot of what I call conventional farming. So as a farmer, we generally have an economic relationship with our landscape. Mm-hmm. So we're about dollars and cents and getting it to the farm gate and selling it. Mm-hmm. We're not really thinking about what happens from that point on. Who's going to eat it? Someone's children are going to eat that.
Yeah.
Or wear that wool. So, I guess a big turning point in my life was when I just considered my job as a farmer, and I was a commodity farmer. I didn't care what happened to it. Truckloads of wheat, cattle, sheep, whatever.
Just
about
yield,
canola,
yield and
hay,
dollars.
Yield and dollars. It was about quantity. Quality was a factor, of course, because it has something to do with it, but it was more yield and return. And so the day that I really thought about what I was doing, I was producing food to feed people. Every decision, when I changed my I guess the responsibility of what I did, that was the day that every decision I made changed. It created a new platform decision making.
What caused it, Charlie? Like, what was the epiphany? Did you watch a documentary? Did someone get sick from a food that you'd eaten? Like, there must have been something big.
It was probably there was a slow burn. So over time, from an environmental point of view, we're going through the millennial drought. Mm-hmm. So this is about 2004 was when I really had some epiphanies and some turning points or some tension events. Charlie Massey in his book called The Reed Warbler, which I have to recommend to anyone who's interested in not just regenerative agriculture, but the future of food in Australia, the world.
The planet.
The planet, totally. Yeah. He says, that one of the turning point is the tension events where, someone gets to a point and they just cannot go on. They just cannot keep doing what they're doing. And often it can go, one of two ways. It can end badly or it can end well. In my case, it was, there was a slow burn. There was constant drought. There was adjusting cattle. There were low commodity prices. There was high costs feed. We were feeding cattle and sheep. And so there was a slow burn, and I really considered asked myself what I was doing. And then I guess one of the turning points was a course I went to in about 2004 called, in the newspaper, in the Boorowa News, there was an ad for a workshop, a one-day workshop, and the headline was "Profiting from the Drought." Right? to read that, totally, they should still use it. I read it and thought, that's a joke, but I'll go along. It could be a bit of fun.
I need to go and do it right now, to be honest.
That's really, yeah. I mean, it's
brutal, man.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, we're struggling big time. But we'll park that to the side.
Yeah,
Continue,
sure,
my
man. So look, that was a turning point for me because it really made me question what I was doing, not just as a farmer, but as an individual. Remember the guy, Sean Martin, who took the course, which was put on by RCS, so Resource Consulting Service Australia. I totally get on their website, check it out. Doing some RCS, Resource Consulting Service Australia. They're doing some amazing things in the regenerative agriculture, holistic farming space.
Yeah.
So they put the day on, and Sean asked me at lunchtime, we were going up the road for a pie or something, and he said, yeah, that's all good, but, are you happy? And I said, well, I'm not unhappy, which I thought was a pretty woeful answer, really.
It's a bit like pregnant or not, isn't it?
Yeah, really piss poor answer. But that got me thinking about, why couldn't I say I'm happy? What was I doing that was innately making me not happy? And so essentially I started asking myself better questions. I mean, I wasn't asking myself questions at all. I was doing what I did. I went 4 years at UNE, University of New England at Armidale. I did 4 years of rural science.
Yeah.
Very science-based course. And that's what it was, and that's fine. But my upbringing in conventional agriculture and then my tertiary education was the status quo. And agronomists told me this. I'd learned that. Dad and I had done things for years and years the same way. And so I didn't question any of it, and I was focusing on things out of our control. And I guess another turning point, which I learned at that course and a subsequent week-long course called Grazing for Profit, put on by RCS, one of the takeaways from that is, and something I always tell farmers, and it's a good business, principle anyway, is focus on what you're in control of. As a farmer, we focus on the weather.
Yeah,
obviously. Yeah, and so I say, well, and I did, and I don't focus on it, but I think about it a bit. But the important thing is, I can't make it rain, but I can make sure I'm prepared for when it does. I can focus on preparation, so I can keep ground cover. So that's as an example of focusing on what you're in control of. So that week of training at Grazing for Profit, that blew my mind. It wasn't just about farming principles like how to move sheep and cattle or how to fence a paddock. It was, again, questioning who I was in that business.
Yeah, no, I get it. There's that, and I may get this description wrong, but it's called the integrity gap. Psychologists talk about it, that if your values are misaligned with what you're doing for work in particular, but whether it's marriage, relationships, etc., the bigger the gap between those values, the less happy you're going to be. And I think a lot of the stuff that Kim and Mike are doing with Thankful for Farmers and, the suicide rates and depression rates is that a big element of that for me, and, I'll stand corrected, but that people are doing things that are fundamentally out of whack with their value system because they think it's the only way to make money.
I think I love that. I haven't heard that integrity gap. One of the practices we do it at Hannah Minnow and we teach other farmers is biodynamics. And Hamish Mackay, who's our educator, he talks about that. He doesn't use that term, but he talks about that the source of a lot of depression and angst, especially in youths, young people, is that they're exactly that. There's a big gap. There's not an alignment between who they are and their purpose, even though they may not know what that is and what they're actually doing. There's friction. And I mean, there's no silver bullet to finding out what your purpose is, but that's the telltale sign, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just that anxiety, and it plays out in so many different ways.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter how much money you make or where you live, and there's classic examples of it. I go to Aspen in Colorado most years, and it's one of the most beautiful places in the world, but they've got one of the highest suicide rates in the US. because people, the old pack up your old kit bag and go somewhere. If you haven't dealt with what's going on in the brain and in the heart, then it doesn't matter where you are. You could be in the Bronx or you can be in the beautiful mountains in Aspen or on the beach at Bondi. The same thoughts are going through your brain. You need to reconcile that shit before you try and, to your point, control the things that you can't control.
Yeah, that's the baggage, isn't it?
It is the baggage.
And we can't. It's a burden. So I guess that course, Grazing for Profit, really helped me deal with some of that baggage. I had farming baggage. I had family farming baggage, which is it's heavy, and not necessarily bad. I actually enjoyed what I did. I just wasn't happy. Which sounds crazy. Because I didn't know anything else. I had nothing to sort of no reference point.
Yeah.
And then when I looked at it from a different perspective, I asked myself questions. I looked at other people, what they were doing, and I asked them better questions. It gave me a totally different perspective on life, not to get too heavy, but my life, because
well, it's heavy stuff, Charlie. It literally is. It's not only your mental health and not only your physical health, but the health of people that eat your food and your family, and they're truly big issues. Like you guys, and I think you use this phrase, you're the stewards of our land, and it goes way further. Like you have a way more important job in healthcare than any doctor I know.
I love that, and you're absolutely right. I totally agree. If I was the Prime Minister, God forbid, I would combine agriculture and the health departments, because they've got to be the same thing. If our ag department was healthy and giving the right advice, our health department would be 10% of the size that it is. We wouldn't have these problems. So, and that's right. That's the responsibility we have. We are producing food that is feeding people. And we are, and that was, as I said before, that was the turning point when I took responsibility for. I was poisoning people in a way, not to sound too dramatic, but I was spraying the crap out of everything. Yeah. Soil, plants, animals. Yeah. Because that's what you did.
And I can imagine that there was a high degree of friction with your dad in trying to change those practices too.
You know what? I have to say, he was so accepting of that.
Good
incredibly.
On him.
Yeah, well, that's the kind of guy he is. He's a lovely man.
Good on you, Dad. What's your dad's name?
Michael, legend.
Michael or Mike?
Mike,
yeah.
Mike to his mate. Michael when he's naughty.
Yeah.
So he...
Mum and wife, that's it.
That's it. So he was... and again, I have to say, it was the group of farmers that I was involved in through this network after the courses that I brought him on board. And that was valuable because it wasn't just me rabbiting on about some crazy new thing I was doing with no sort of third-party support or evidence to prove what I was doing. I invited him to come to conferences, to meet. I formed a little business board with a few other farmers as part of this network that RCS create, and he understood, and he'd really, I guess at some point he decided that this was my farm.
Yeah.
I literally did inherit the farm.
Yeah,
and with that came responsibility of running that farm.
Get it?
And if I wanted to change it, and I did, and look, I went cold turkey. Which I wouldn't recommend to anyone. I sort of cut chemical out immediately. Yeah, pretty much overnight. We sold a heap of gear, and as I said, I wouldn't recommend that to anyone. I always suggest that people, as an example, if they're spending $500 on animal health, or probably more cropping and that sort of figures, but $500 a hectare on cropping, right? Just carve off 10% and put that to biological, biodynamic, some other. Just dip your toe in the water. You're not going to blow your budget apart if it's a disaster, which is unlikely to be. You're not, you haven't bet the farm on it.
Yeah.
And then over those years, you just put a bit more aside, and that's the way I call it, a soft landing into regenerative ag.
Yeah.
Well, we've really strayed off the. What was the question?
We'll come back to it, man. The farming practices.
We went from bad to the good. We went straight to good.
That's good, but we will come back. Well, why don't you do that? Because there's a couple of layers in between. But how do you actually define a biodynamic farm?
Well, we're not certified organic or biodynamic. Mm-hmm. So, and to me, certification has its merit, but
who certifies this stuff? Is it a government organisation?
No, they're generally independent.
Yeah,
they may have. I guess they have government blessing to do so. You know, they are a registered body that has the power to certify practices.
Yeah. Is it substance or is it form? Like, is it to tick the box or is it truly worth something?
Look, there is no doubt that a stamp on an organic product for some products demands a premium.
Yeah.
And a lot of customers look for that.
What about the substance?
There's no quality testing. Like no one gets a little. Actually, there's another conversation around the tech that's becoming available to do that, and that's a really exciting field because when you can get your phone and whip it over an apple and get a rough nutrient density sort of reading.
Are they working on that technology?
Yeah, that's coming.
Like
totally.
Similar to the whole food trust kind of technology, or?
Well, it's. There's the provenance technology.
Yeah, but this goes even deeper. That'll be able to get nutritional quality.
Is that apple? How's that apple stack up to that apple?
Yeah, damn.
Yeah, so that's what we're looking at.
And what about nasties and things in it, like whether it's been grown with herbicides, pesticides, etc.
I trust that is part of it.
Yeah,
so the nutrient and there's chemical. I think actually the chemical is probably easy to do.
That is going to be.
It's a game changer.
Powerful.
Totally. So. So certification currently doesn't test for that. So it's ticking boxes. There's a cost to it. And look, truth be known, I've tasted some pretty ordinary organic food.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably because it's organic by default. Someone's taken chemical out of the system, but they haven't looked at the whole, the balance and gone, well, I'm taking chemical out, which is playing a role.
Yeah.
I'm taking out fertilizer. What do I have to do to maintain the fertility or enhance fertility? And so with biodynamic, back to your question, so with biodynamics, it's a practice and principles. So we make our own, let's call it fertilizer, we call it preparations.
Yeah.
We're mainly using cow manure. So we've got plenty of that. So there's a couple of different preparations we make on farm with our base materials and takes some months to make. There's one called 500, horn 500, cow horn 500, which is basically is the crazy stuff, Paul. Stuffing lactating cow manure in a cow horn. Has to be a cow horn in the ground.
What's the significance of a cow horn?
Well, it's a beautiful vessel for composting. There's fermentation, there's composting that takes place in the ground.
Specific to cows, though.
Yeah, so the cow, as opposed to a ram's horn or others, there's a spiral shape of that cow horn, and there's cosmic significance to that. We can talk about later on, and linking that to plants. It's a beautiful physical vessel that protects the manure in the ground over the winter as it's making. Worms get in there, they eat it, they pasteurize it, and they take off. And the earth in winter breathes in. There are rhythms, like everything. In a 12-month period, the earth breathes out essentially in summer, and then breathes in winter.
I've never heard this before, but it sounds amazing.
So there's a sort of a.
It's like yoga for the soil.
For the globe, Yeah. So there's this sort of. In winter, and we've got so far away from this as humans. Our winter's a time to reflect and replenish and recover. Right, it's a sort of drawing in and not a hibernation. But it's a time to restore, right? And this is what's happening to that manure in the ground over winter. So we put it in autumn, we pull it out in spring, and then we mix that with water, and at 50 grams a hectare, right? And then we put that over the land. There's another one called cow manure concentrate. It's a bit more bulkier. We use cow manure, eggshell, basalt dust, compost preparations, which are basically fermented herbs.
Yeah.
We make a brew in a cement mixer. We put that in the ground, and that you can use at 150 grams a hectare. It's fascinating stuff.
It is. What about from a rotational perspective? How does that all tie in with organic biodynamics, or is it a completely separate conversation?
Rotational as in animals or plants, or what sort of?
Everything, that you give the soil and the crops and, whether
cycles.
Cycles.
Yeah. Well, look, we, we don't grow any crops, but I know, in that we used to.
But you let the perennials regrow, yeah?
Totally, good call. So we let all our cropping country go back to whatever grew. We when we pulled the trigger in 2004, I didn't sow any more pasture. I just wanted save the money and let natural succession take place. So native species like warrego grass, which probably hasn't been seen at Hannah for 50, 60, 70 years, it appeared. The seed was there, a bird brought it in. We created a window of opportunity for that seed and many other types of species that were native to come back.
Yeah.
So again, we're working with nature and just letting, you create the opportunity for things to flourish by not decking it with chemical and ploughing it up and trying to control that natural succession that plants. I mean, nature tries to move to complexity because that's stable. That's why monocrops are so hard to grow.
Of course.
Because hang on, you've got bugs now. No, you have got enough nitrogen. No, and then you start adding these things and then you put something else out of balance. So I was talking to someone earlier today about that, drenching sheep, right? So you drench sheep. You might do a backline for lice, right? That can compromise the health of animals. Then that compromises their ability to resist a worm. Their worm burden levels are lowered.
Yeah.
Then you've got to drench them. The drench goes out the back in their manure. Then you start killing dung beetles. The manure's not being cycled. And then birds are eating dead dung beetles that have died from chemicals. You just don't know where these things stop.
Well, it doesn't stop. I was going to ask you that. Did you notice, and whether it was measurable or otherwise, different species of birds and other land animals coming back to the farm?
While I am a scientist, Paul, I'm a terrible recorder of stuff, which is to my detriment, because what I need to do, we've actually recorded a lot, but we haven't sort of put it together. I need any interns out there who want a job for 3 months. I can give them piles of grazing records, as in how many animals in what sort of paddocks over what periods of time, how much grass they took out, soil tests over probably 30 years, lots of data that I need put together so I can actually demonstrate and identify what we're doing.
Oh, we've got to do that for you.
Yeah. That'd be great. So, I mean, given the results we're seeing in quality of meat, health of animal, we don't drench or vaccinate. And if we have to use antibiotics, those animals just don't go.
Get quarantined.
Get quarantined.
Yeah.
So that's saying to me they're healthy, right? So, why are they healthy? Well, the pastures they're eating are diverse and healthy. Why are they healthy? Because the soil's healthy. What are we doing? Biodynamics. We're rotationally grazing or managed grazing. We're letting nature essentially become more complex and do what it does best. And we're listening. One of the things as farmers, and I didn't do any of this, was listen. And Charlie Massey talks about landscape literacy.
Explain more. What are you listening for? Is it like is it literal listening, or is it just science?
It's literal listening. It's observing. It's feeling. Us farmers don't feel much.
Yeah. Emotionally, or your crocodile Dundee style with your stick. And
that's another whole nother conversation. We are doing a lot of subtle energy stuff, which does involve feeling and dowsing and using one's intuition. But as farmers, we don't. Again, we in our toolbox, in our farming toolbox, we've got lots of tools which involve generally chemical and mechanical stuff, and that's our toolbox. And it's a formula. An agronomist will say you got to spray this, and this over this times of the year. You're going to say that. You're going to do this, and we look for quick fixes, or we look for formulas. Nature doesn't work to any formula.
Yeah,
it adapts. And we do our best as humans, not just farmers, to interfere. But if we just start listening and watching, observing, feeling, being more literate, and Charlie Massey talks about this, it's about just holding the space. And this sounds a bit spooky wah-wah, but holding the space for nature to do its thing. And literally watching animals' behaviour. What do they do when they go into a paddock? What are they eating? Are they eating the thistle or the Patterson's curse or the grass? Or what sort of grass? Why are they eating that? Well, 9 times out of 10 they're eating it because they need it, because they're self-medicating, because they're smart.
Yeah.
We've lost that.
And they know that they get different nutrients and minerals from different kinds of plants. They're that intuitive.
Totally intuitive. I mean, that's how they evolved.
Damn.
And that gets back to our focus on increasing the number of plants in a pasture. So at any one time of the day in the year, they can go, damn it, I'm now pregnant. I need a bit more selenium or whatever the mineral might be.
Got it.
Copper in this or whatever. And, the more gaps we can fill not necessarily medicinal plants. All plants have some medicinal qualities.
Of course.
But, so there's native species that we have. There's forbs and legumes, and then there's exotic ones, which traditionally are cocksfoot and phalaris and a few basics. But we're looking to sow multi-species stuff like radish and chicory and other brassicas and oats and, annuals and perennials that are going to essentially firstly improve soil. So we get to have that conversation about soil. Like soil grows plants, but plants make soil.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the distinction, because it's the plants inhabiting a space in soil, and many different types of plants. They all have a role. They're pumping sugars into that, feeding the biology in the soil. And then when that biology is healthy, there's this wonderful connection between the biology of the soil and the plants, and they're talking to each other. The science around fungus and the information highway that's under the ground is incredible. So we have this smorgasbord of plants growing to improve the soil. It means we have a smorgasbord of plants above ground to feed animals.
Yeah.
Ruminants, essentially.
Yeah. I get it. Just covering off the last of the categories of farming, just because, again, I used to make this mistake, the difference between factory farming and intensive farming. Is there a difference?
Well, look, factory, to me, is reasonably defined. It's shedded. It's it's like
out
a factory.
Of sunlight.
It's out of sunlight. There's a mechanical, mechanized sort of formulated way of producing, chicken or pork or whatever it happens to be. Intensive, I can mean many things.
Many things.
I guess some people could say we're farming intensively insofar as we have large numbers of animals in small areas for short periods of time. It's the type of grazing we do. It's planned grazing, cell grazing, what do you want to call it? So people go, well, that's intensive. Well, yes, it is, but we're moving them quickly. They're always on green, fresh feed. They're outside. They're on water. They're in sunshine. It's a natural environment they're in. And dairy could be seen as intensive, even though sometimes they're shedded and sometimes they're not. It's a lot of infrastructure. It's density of animals. It's density of inputs as well. So that to me is intensive.
Yeah.
And then as you move up the scale, which again is basically, the more we work with nature, and letting the nature take its course, and again observing, watching animals, and letting them express their cowness, or their pigness, to use Joel Salatin's phrase. Pigs who just want to dig stuff up and eat, let them do that. And we use them in some areas to, essentially improve areas where there might be a bit of a hard pan. We feed them in areas where they then dig up the ground, and we throw, some plants, but seeds there to grow food, which they can then go back and eat. But you've got more diversity there. So, whilst moving from intensive or factory to what we do is less intensive and working more with nature, it actually is becoming more complex, but in a really positive way.
Positive way. No, complex in the most beautiful sense of the word.
Totally.
I was going to ask you though, the benefits of, that's yours, mate. Go for it. Of biodynamic, sustainable farming practices, because I think that, and this is a question that I asked Joel when we had him on the show a month or so ago, can you feed the world with sustainable farming practices? Because the flip side of that argument is that, the Monsantos and the Cargills and the JBSs of the world will tell you we can't feed 7 billion people at the moment with these sustainable practices. How are we going to feed 7.5, 9, 10, 11, wherever this human population stops? How do you answer that question, mate? What are some of the real benefits of sustainable farming that just don't get enough airplay?
Well, there's some great stats around that to start with. So about 70% of the world's population is fed from farms that are 5 acres or less.
Yeah, okay? Wow.
And 80% from 10 acres and less. So we're doing it. This is not a new thing. This is not a start from scratch, sort of a problem. We can't do it tomorrow. There's no doubt about that, because the world's population is, the food system is based on what it's based on. and there's obviously pushback from the Monsantos and whoever, the big players, because the current business model is fantastic.
Of course.
For lots of reasons, but it's a terrible business model for farmers. Because they're just not getting the value. They're not receiving the value that they deserve. So, how we combat that is, I guess, it's through education. I like to think that I know that children are our future. So we if we start making inroads into their education in school, out of school, and start the process of them understanding and getting used to the fact that organic farming, regenerative farming, natural farming, whatever you want to call it, is normal, right? And this is something that they can have conversations with their parents about. So the Stephanie Alexander school programs, even Costa and Dirt Girl on the ABC, those sort of fascinating shows that getting the kids in the right headspace. So we have to start on many fronts, but one of them is definitely the children. Making, as I said before, giving farmers a soft landing into regenerative agriculture with all its many tools, right? So I say there's a toolbox. It's a regenerative ag toolbox. I like to think that biodynamics is aligning in that toolbox.
Yeah.
And the RCS stuff is like, gives you the shelf and the little thing that pops out and the compartments in that. And then you use permaculture, biodynamics, whatever you want, and pop that into your toolbox, and that is your toolbox. So, educating farmers about, I guess, the importance, and it's easy stuff. It reduces risk. It's the costs are much less. You're much more control of what you're doing, and you're focusing on what you're in control of. So, if we can educate farmers to think really differently about things, and then so that's at one end of the spectrum. And at the moment I see a push away from conventional ag. Whether it's because the droughts, it's something that drought's going to keep on happening.
Yeah.
How we respond to drought is a very important thing. So there's a push away from conventional agriculture. And there's the beautiful thing is there's an attraction, there's a pull towards this different type of growing food, right? And that's supported by the eaters, as I call them,
a
on the feeder.
A new breed of conscious eaters.
Totally, and they want to know where it's from. They want it, whether it's because it's, they're focusing on the ethics, how much chemicals in there. They just want to know it's good value. They want to connect with the farmer. And there's so many compelling reasons why I believe eaters, need or should need to know where their food's from.
Yeah.
I mean, set a good example for your kids, if anything.
It's an interesting one though, Charlie. And we were literally having this conversation today because we had this pork product from Luke Winder, who has this beautiful sustainable farm, renowned for his down at Tathra Place out at the back of Goulburn, renowned for his ducks, but also produces this, really beautiful pork product. And we were tasting it, and it just doesn't taste as good as Kurubuta pork or Borrowdale pork, which is more traditional intensive farming practices. And it's a beautiful story. It's probably more nutritionally dense. We don't know. We need to get that testing done. It's certainly way better for the environment. But our food service customers in particular just aren't willing to bank on being able to sell that product, because still the litmus test is taste. As much as there's a fuckload of conversation that goes on around I'm for the environment, I'm for animal husbandry, people aren't putting their money where their mouth is. And there's, we haven't moved the needle. We've tried really hard over the last 18 months, with a couple of programs. We tried it with Torello that we spoke about offline, which is the solution for a really big problem with the bobby calves and things out of the whole dairy industry, and other stuff like what Luke's doing, stuff like what you're doing. And we think, certainly out of Victor Churchill and the retail stores, the end consumer is willing to pay for it, but the bulk of the game is still in food service, and we're really not at a dead end, because we'll never stop trying. And there's some amazing people, like Matt and Neil Perry and the likes, but there's not enough of them. And
so is it it's convenience? Is it a price, I guess?
It's price. Price is absolutely one, because if there's a premium attached to something that doesn't taste, you know, because
Where's
we're
the
all
value?
because people equate richness, you know, like take, you know, Japanese Wagyu at one end of the scale. It is so rich and so expensive. So, and then you go to a beautiful pasture-fed product that is way more beefy. It's not as rich. And for some people, a particular consumer, and probably more consumers than not, that there's more implied value in richness as opposed to all of the other KPIs that go around what is a good quality product, just outside of taste. And all those things, the environment, health, animal husbandry.
It is a tough one. I mean, my experience is more in the retail, obviously, and I appreciate that in the wholesale game, there are many different factors. And I get there's habit, isn't there? It's like we just want, you know, we want that carton of rump to turn up.
Consistency too, you know, like.
So how do we get the farmers to, I mean, one of my passions is obviously trying to for people to go direct and for farmers to understand that they have that responsibility. I mean, how do we encourage other farmers to take more interest in what they're growing? You know, that's at one end, and then the consumers or the eaters. Like, I mean, I say, you know, sell the sizzle, not just the sausage. I think there's a lot of value in the story, but as you say, at the end of the day, there's a budget for the week, and that's got to go so far. I guess the interesting thing is too, just thinking about, I mean, it does apply to meat, but food in general is that, you know, I guess a lot of people think organic food is expensive, you know, and really processed or non-organic food is often subsidised by the environment, you know. So, you know, but people don't know that, and they are used to, you know, cheap food, which isn't generally the cheaper it is, the less nutritionally dense and so on. But you know, how do we get them to change their minds and understand that that they should be interested in this? You know, because it gets back to that whole doctor thing. You know, like we have food that is making us crook, and we pay for that in our health. We literally pay in doctors' bills. And Joel probably talked about this when you spoke.
Pay the farmer now or the doctor later. Exactly. And this is the big one. Like, until we can get people to start thinking long term and walking around and seeing literally the level of obesity in any industrialized country in the world.
Australia's number one now, I think.
Australia and the US are number one. You know, like the rates are nearing 80%. You know, the level of cancer, diabetes, heart disease, brain disease, but we can't seem to get people to go, you know what, that's a problem that I'll deal with when I'm older, as opposed to going, you know what, you could spend 10 or 15% more on this rather than another new iPhone or rather than another plasma screen.
That's what their
TV.
Super's for. Their Super's to look after them in there.
It's a crazy, we've created people that are so myopic in their thinking. And of course we've got governments that, you know, I would absolutely say have very conflicting legislation insofar as the powerhouses of the world have enormous influences, and I get it's challenging, but they should be spending their money on subsidising good food and good farming practices rather than trying to fix this tsunami of healthcare that is literally going to cripple certainly the Australian economy. Like, we won't be able to deal with even brain disease alone. Like, my mum died of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. It's $350,000 for the last 5 years of their life.
Who can afford it? That's just
crazy. Yeah. That's just 5 years. Like, she had it for 10 years. You know, thankfully my family had the money to be able to look after her and keep her at home. But, you know, like you extrapolate that across chronic disease that's starting. You know, you're getting 20-year-olds that are getting, you know, type 2 diabetes now. You know, that's an enormous cost burden on society for life.
And I think that you're right, getting back to government and I guess the medical world, some of those benchmarks are pretty shit house too, aren't they? You know, you want to talk about cholesterol or, you know, what denotes good health. I mean, I think that the health system is broken in itself because it's
broken and ignorant.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean,
I always say this, Charlie, Mike, I come from a family of doctors. My mum, my dad, my brother. Not one of those guys, or my brother probably does these days because he's into this stuff, but they wouldn't have a clue. Like, cholesterol's bad for you. They wouldn't have a clue. You know, we were raised on the food pyramid. a fucking diabolically unhealthy form of eating that's caused a generation of obesity.
Which I think was set up that sugar film.
Yeah.
Yagami Gama's wonderful film there. You know, there was the fat industry, there's the sugar industry, and the sugar industry won.
They literally paid off Harvard professors to say that fat was the cause of heart disease.
Totally. Yeah.
When the whole time it was sugar.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I don't know. There's no, at the end of the day, there's no silver bullet, is there? You know, and you know, I always advocate a mixed diet. You know, I'm all for eating meat, but you know, making sure that it's ethical and it's grass fed and it's you know, just getting some of those basics right. And I think with the processed stuff, I mean, people think it is cheap, but it's cheap for a reason. But you know, if people, and I think there are people getting around in the world and are doing a fantastic job of actually identifying to people, okay, what's in your food budget? What are you currently buying? Like, you know, walking around the supermarket with a shopping trolley going, okay, this is the budget. Did you know that you can actually buy this, and this? Just, you know, just crank up your cooking skills a little bit. You can actually spend as much, you know, the same amount of money, much more nutritionally dense at a diet. But it's just that headspace, isn't it? It's like going down the aisle, throwing the crap in the trolleys. And, you know, I think that really should have licenses to be parents. You know, I see kids with chupa chups in their mouths.
I know.
I mean, you got to talk all days about that, rant all about all that.
But here's you know, like I had this light bulb moment yesterday. I was listening to, and I apologise, I won't even try and remember his name, but he's a researcher in the cancer space. And he was talking about intermittent fasting and a whole bunch of other things. And I go, if we literally could just get people to drop one meal a day,
totally
stop eating breakfast and allocate that cost of all that sugary shit that you're eating to the other 2 meals and make the quality of that food so much more. So eat less, you're going to save more money, you're going to be healthier, and you can apply that money that you're saving. So net, you're not spending any more money, but you're eating less, you're less of a burden on the planet because of the whole consumption. But, you know, we're all addicted to 3 meals a day. And
imagine how much time you'd save. You know, buying the food, sitting down, eating your bowl of cornflakes.
All the rubbish, it all comes in packaging.
That's it. You got to put it in the dishwasher, the whole thing. I mean, I say to people in the farming context, you got to change the paddock between your ears first. And it's the same, I think, in the other end of the spectrum where, you know, again, I don't have the answers to how to do that, but if we can just change the thinking, it's like, oh, okay, so don't have breakfast, save money, save time, get healthier. Yeah. Like, it's a win-win plus, you know.
Buy nutrients, not quality. Totally. Sorry, not quantity.
Yeah. I mean, getting back to the biodynamics, you know, that it's nutritionally dense. You just don't need to eat as much. So, you know, in theory, there's an offsetting of, well, let's just say it costs 10%, 20% more or whatever it might be. You actually eat less. So there's actually...
Well, you need less.
That's right, you need less. Yeah. Because what the volume is, you know, in your body, you just don't need it.
I literally, you know, with no disrespect to all of the amazing people that listen to this, I challenge every single person, because I reckon anyone over the age of 30 is, whether it's really overweight, obese or marginally overweight, that you fucking need to lose a bit of weight. So you need to stop eating so much. So why wouldn't you adopt these practices? Yeah. Literally every person on this show should cut out, if they're eating 3 meals a day, cut out 1 meal a day.
I think, you know, Hamish Mackay, our educator, he talks about this in that, you know, there's an expression, you are what you eat. It's actually you eat what you are. Yeah. You know, if you are not in a good headspace, if you are not thinking about physical activity, you're not thinking about your mental capacity, then you're going to eat shit food.
Of course.
And so it is a bit of the chicken and the egg, you know. We've got to change the thinking to get people to then just put their toe in the water. And you know what it's like, you're a pretty fit sort of rooster. You know, when you get that hit of endorphins and you get that nutrient hit, you know, it's like, wow, I can do this. I can do this again. I've been doing that morning. It's funny, I heard something the other day, you know, we used to call not having breakfast as skipping breakfast. Yeah. And now, you know, it's intermittent fasting. So, I mean, I've been skipping breakfast for a couple of years now, and it's fantastic. You're a wise owl, man. Well, you know, I mean,
we don't need it.
No, we so don't need it. I actually function better without it.
Yeah, everyone does. It's science. Everyone's psychologically addicted to eating. Yeah. You literally don't need it.
Where's
and the science is so deep. Like, I really do. If people... haven't read, haven't listened, there is so much science and everything from disease mitigation through to energy, through to looking better, to having more mental clarity. It's a really powerful, simple, and get it, people, free, And this is the thing when you look at the healthcare industry, they don't make money from this stuff. They don't make money unless you get chemotherapy if you got cancer. Like they don't want to hear that eating well and fasting may actually be more beneficial to someone with cancer than actually getting chemo and radiotherapy.
And it's there's a parallel with farming where the business model of farming, as I might have mentioned before, is it's a great business model for everyone else. You're buying a chemical, you're buying a fertilizer, you're buying this, you're buying that. The poor cocky he's the one getting shafted.
Of course.
And so, no one, government, corporate, they're not supporting, is that, whether it's ag or the health, and they're pretty much the same thing.
They are the same thing.
Same model.
Yeah.
There's no incentive for anyone else to support that. It's the, people on ground who, have a turning point, or they have a health problem, themselves or a family member. And then they ask themselves better questions like, really, do I need breakfast? Or do I need to buy that bag of fertilizer?
Yeah.
So, it's a big one. And I don't have all the answers, Paul.
You've got some of them for sure, Charlie. I want, because this is another one that again is misunderstood, and I didn't know about it. I'm so grateful that I'm starting to understand it. But sustainable farming and carbon, because this whole thing that people just put this blanket over animal agriculture and go, it's the biggest contributor to global greenhouse gas, and they march into our store down at Piermont and they rant and rave without truly understanding that there's the good, the bad, and the ugly with everything.
Yeah.
And you know what, people, you're absolutely right. A lot of farming practices are actually emitting a whole bunch of greenhouse gases, but that healthy animals and healthy farming practices are actually sequestering carbon.
Totally.
Give us a little bit more insight there.
Well, I guess getting back to the plants and soil, growing grass is, as I said, makes soil. So we use ruminants, sheep and cattle, to graze grass, and that grazing process, that removing of vegetation, obviously feeds the animal, but it stimulates plants to pump sugars into the ground, and that sugar is a consequence of photosynthesis, right? So we're taking carbon out of the atmosphere and we're putting that into the soil. So there's a very basic model of carbon sequestration. A lot of people run around whatever agenda it might be, whether it's a health agenda or ethical agenda or whatever, and they're saying we've got to stop putting carbon into the atmosphere. Well, that's one way to deal with it, but whether we like it or not, coal-fired power stations are going to keep burning. We're still consuming resources like no one's business. We can't change that tomorrow. As much as I'd like to, we can't. So what can we do? We got to look at solutions to take carbon out of the atmosphere and put it back in the ground. And this pumping of sugars and essentially carbon into the soil where it stays, right, is the most effective way to take carbon out of the atmosphere. I spent some years battling wind farms at Boorowa, right? And I initially thought they were wonderful. It was financial. Well, it was really mainly just financial incentive to get involved. And then I did the numbers. I looked at the research. There was noise, environmental,
goddamn ugly.
Economic. There's a whole ugly. There's so many that there are subjective and very objective measurements, or reasons why someone may or may not like them. I spent 2 years fighting them, because I didn't believe that was good use of public money, good use of our electricity bills that we pay, good use of resources, and that to me was not a solution. As I say to people, we have a biological problem here, right? We're burning fossil fuels, we're ploughing up soil, we're doing all sorts of things, burning forests, is pumping carbon into the atmosphere. We can't use mechanics or chemistry, right, or physics
to fix that.
Yeah, we're going to use biology.
Absolute sense.
Let's
really good point.
Let's use the same thing that basically created it. Plants, fossil fuels. What were they? They were plants, right? So let's pump that carbon back in the ground. That gets us to how do we do that? We use ruminants, right? Animals, cattle, sheep.
Yeah.
That's another whole big conversation. And you know, I'm pro eating meat and I'm pro producing meat. From the health points of eating it, and you know, in terms of using animals and sheep in the landscape to heal that landscape, because that's what we've got to be doing. That's the most effective way to do this.
Yeah.
You know, if we just put aside the food thing, sequestering carbon is done most effectively by using ruminants. In the US, in the 250 years ago, there were in North America there were some hundreds of million of bison. Okay, ruminants, farting, burping, roaming the grasslands. They basically created those grasslands, pumping carbon into the atmosphere. Right. Over time, bison numbers dwindled. Domestic bovines have increased. There's not really a net change in the number or the amount of gas getting put into the atmosphere. So we're not, when people say we've got to take animals out of the picture, then, well, they were already there in the first place, just a different type of animal. And if we do, tell me how we're going to sequester that carbon, because wind farms aren't going to do it. There's a whole lot of other methods, and the movie 2040 is a fantastic, another one, Damon Gamo's movie. Totally support anyone to go see that. There's some really good ways that we can turn the ship around. But again, and Paul Hawken in his book Drawdown, 100 of the top sort of methods of drawing carbon down. If you add up all the regenerative agriculture practices, it's 2.4 times more effective than the very next one, which I think is wind farms.
Yeah.
So, and I read the other day he's writing another book, and I think he's going to focus on regen ag, in all its variations.
Yeah.
So, when I and we and people have heated debate about the use of animals or whether we should eat the meat or have them at all, I start trying to agree. Let's get some yeses. Are we trying? Do we need to put carbon on the ground? Yeah, of course we do.
Yeah.
Do we know how to do that? Yeah, there's lots of ways. Is it important? Let's identify, were there bison here before, as an example. You start with yeses.
Yeah.
And then you understand where they're coming from. Is it ethical? Is it environmental? Is it health? And then you can just, you get to a point where the argument for having animals in the landscape is compelling. Yeah. It's really hard to argue that, and there's nowhere on the planet where animals don't exist.
You can't have one without the other.
No.
Like this is the most ridiculous thing about the whole. Let's feed the whole planet on plants.
On soybean.
Yeah.
Yep, that's good.
Yeah, and like it's a rabbit hole that will go down for hours. But it's interesting you raised that point before about technology not being the solution. No. I was reading an interview with Yvon Chouinard, the founder of Patagonia.
Yeah.
And he was talking about Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and their pursuit of trying to get people to Mars because this planet's fucked. And he's going, it's the most ridiculous concept that I've ever heard. Like, we need to fix what we've got here. We can't solve it by building more machines that actually burn more fuel.
You imagine how much impact, I don't know how much those roosters have spent on that sort of stuff, but
billions.
Billions. So, and even ScoMo, didn't he? He just donated 150 million to Donald.
Yeah. See, like I voted for ScoMo.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't think I did. I think I forgot to do it because I went to a farm. Hey, it's a good excuse. But I would have voted for him because I was raised, and I've never voted Labor in my life.
Yep.
But that guy's making some busted-ass decisions, and getting into bed with that crazy Donald Trump is just, it frightens the hell out of me.
Well, you think about the 150 mil, like if that went to, that's going to go nowhere. That's going to pay the janitor at NASA or something,
Yeah.
If that 150 mil had been put into agriculture, in farming, to help farmers transition to better ways to farm, whatever that looks like, let's just make sure whatever you're doing, you're sequestering carbon. Let's put you through some training like RCS or some of the holistic management framework. Let's put that. I mean, the impact of that, we won't need to go to bloody Mars, will we?
No.
In Australia, the rest of the world can go and leave it to us.
And it doesn't, I get it's really complex, but it just seems so practical and so reasonable and so rational that it doesn't make any sense to me why the government's not putting enormous amounts of policy and money behind it.
Short-term thinking, vested interest,
bad leaders,
not understanding the significance, and also it is short-term thinking. I understand that buy a bale system has got a lot of farmers out of trouble in this last drought. Okay, money has been donated to the charity and other charities, and they are saving lives essentially. But what they're not doing, I don't believe, is preparing them for the next one. It's going to happen. A couple of years' time, there'll be another drought.
Yeah,
we're not even out of this one.
No,
and farmers have got to start thinking about the next one. Terry McCoster at RCS, he says, we're always doing one of three things as a farmer. We're either in drought, getting out of a drought, or preparing for a drought.
Yeah.
And we've got to think about that. And as I said, as buy, bale and other things had a place, we've got to start diverting those funds and change our thinking to
grassroots.
Let's not give them the fish, right? Yeah. Let's give them the fishing rod and teach them how to fish.
Yeah, I love your saying on that. It's so true. But it's like that with everything we do as a society.
Totally.
We have Beyond Blue and Are You OK and all these things which are about getting people when they're thinking about walking up to the gap and jumping off, as opposed to going, again, like, where's mental health at? What's the connection with food? What's the connection with the integrity gap that we talked about before? Why aren't we teaching our children to actually follow what's of value to them, not making them be doctors, lawyers, and now IT people, because that's the good dinner party conversation for parents that spend good money sending their kids to Joey's and King's, and they want a good return on investment. Like it's
There's
true.
that economic relationship with your children. It's not just the landscape.
Insecurity. We live in a world of fucking insecurity, and it permeates some of our biggest systems, and totally. Food and health being two of those.
Have you heard of Dr. Zach Bush?
Rings a bell. Great name for
great Dr. Zach Bush. So he's a triple certified doctor in the States. He has he's worth checking out. He's done a number of he doesn't have his own, but he's been on Rich Roll podcast. He's been on
Rogan and
I think he might have been Joe. Yeah. He's on some So his beef is he's got many, but it's food, it's environment, and it's epigenetics. Okay, so we are born with genes, and that's how we are created, and that's who we are. However, it's our interaction with the environment, which includes what we put in our mouths and the environment we put into ourselves, that defines the expression of those genes, right? So he's saying that cancer is a result of many forms.
It's a metabolic disease.
Exactly right. It's he has the expression. It's they're lonely cells, right? They're cells that want to multiply because they're lonely.
Yeah,
and it's like humans. We are so connected with social media, but we're being so isolated and disconnected. And he has this thing about breathe your biome, right? We're talking about food. Yeah. We're talking about disconnection before, and people just not really caring or understanding. When we go into nature, whether it's the park with your dog or it's a Hanamino Boorowa, our farm, you are stepping into nature, and there's germs and there's good stuff and there's sunshine and there's vitamin D and there's, all sorts of wonderful things going on there. You are the complexity and the biodiversity of nature. Your body is absorbing that, and that's good for everything, and especially your gut.
Yeah, because microbiome and
totally. And there's so many similarities between soil, the biology of the soil, and the biome of the soil, and your gut. Under a microscope, they're very similar.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So
and healthy guts and healthy soil, and unhealthy and unhealthy.
It makes so much sense.
It does.
And if you think about a plant, right, its stomach is external. The soil is its stomach. That's where nutrients pass from soil, that outer, outside the plant into its roots. So, there's that sort of parallel as well. So, again, this is another wonderful thing about biodynamics. It reconnected me with nature because I started having a relationship with nature, and we are part of it. So I started having a relationship with myself. Because of the food I'm putting in. I mean, a lot of what we are made up of now that I'm looking at Paul didn't result from you eating. Yeah, it resulted from you externally.
Of course,
your hair, your skin.
Well, skin's your biggest organ.
Totally, it's absorbing nutrients. You do the sums on what nutrient goes into your in food and goes in your stomach. It's not the same as if you were then to look at the nutrients in your body and how that came to be. It's not the same.
Of course.
So when we're in a polluted society, when we're in cities, for extended periods of time, we are not digesting
life,
are we, And that's, it gets back to the selling the story and going, don't just eat the food, go to the farm. Go and roll in that cow shit.
Yeah.
Eat it.
And it is that that disconnection and similarly to death. And it's interesting you talked about Rich Roll before, because I genuinely think that guy does a lot of good. But this whole plant-based movement, he's way off the mark. And he had that
Totally.
Bruce Friedrich, who's the guy behind GFI, that's driving the whole plant-based and cell-based movement. And this whole
Frankenfood.
It is, yeah. And I was going to ask your view on it. Like, I'm pretty sure I know what it is, but just a little bit of context around the questioning. We've met with a bunch of them. In fact, we had some senior people from Impossible that reached out to us recently and had them in here, and super lovely, well-intentioned human beings. But you scratch any of the things that we've just been talking about. Are your inputs monoculture or polyculture? Like, they really had an elementary understanding of what I was even asking. Are they herbicide or pesticide? Are they soy-based?
GMO.
And therefore 80% is linked to Monsanto, that's now owned by Bayer. Collectively, two of the most diabolical companies on the planet. And then you produce this heavily petrol-intensive, energy-intensive product in a big factory in the US, multiple factories in the US. You freeze it, you ship it to the other side of the country or the other side of the world if it's coming to Australia, and you have the audacity to sit there and say, no, it's good for the land, it's good for humans, and we're saving the animals. And so I had this conversation with him, because I go, the first two, they go, shit, he's got a point there. And he goes, but the animals, you got to look after the animals. And I said, what do you think dies when you plant annual crops?
Totally.
Like, what do you think lives in the soil and the birds and the fish that are in the rivers around it? And they have no answers for it, man. But we've got this machine behind them. You've got Bill Gates, you've got Buffett, you've got bugger lugs from Virgin. I always forget his name.
Richard,
the smiling beard or whatever they call him. And it's got momentum. But I really do feel, and Joel Salatin said this to me, he goes, I don't predict anything, but the one thing I do predict is that this, particularly the cell-based meat, is going to be something that if we go down that path, we'll get to a point, and go, oh my God, this has been a disaster on every level.
I agree with all that, and that when I say they, as those in support of that sort of that technology, and it is technology, it's not really food, is it? It's highly processed food. It's about the ethics, it's about health, or it's about the environment. And as you say, on all three of those pillars,
fail miserably.
Absolutely, and it really it's driven by economics. Yeah. It's driven by here's an opportunity. And the crazy thing is, as you say, if you stand back and you stack it all up, you look at it and you pull it apart, and you use different language and you just be really objective about it, and you put that in front of the supporters, your average Joe goes, oh no, that's really good. They would have kittens. And the thing about millennials or the new generation, they hate being tricked. Right. So if we can really clearly identify, because they will turn like a Scorpio, if we can identify to them that they have been tricked, it's total trickery, then that's an opportunity. And now how we do that, I mean, for me, it's about being transparent, being authentic, and wanting people to ask me more questions about what I do. And it should be the same for the supporters of that. It's like, okay, tell me about the plants, this plant-based burger, for instance. As you say, is it got pesticides? Is it GMO? Do you know about GMO? Probably not. Do you know? I mean, and Matthew Evans in his book on eating meat, he talks about this in a very balanced way, and he says, as an example, and I hope I may be misquoting him, rice. Okay, there are 40,000 ducks get shot a year, shot, trapped, whatever, to produce rice in, I think it's Australia or Victoria. Don't quote me on that. My point is, when people go, I'm not going to eat meat, I'm going to have rice or plant-based stuff. As you say, there are there are sacrifices that are made. Whether it's chemical on. I mean, you're using chemical in the first place, and then what are you doing? You're killing something. So there's a great. You're familiar with Diana Rogers and Sustainable Dish?
We've had her on the show.
Yeah, I met her the other week in.
Yeah, she's an amazing woman.
She's fantastic, and she interviewed
Sacred Cow, the documentary she's doing.
Totally. Can't wait for that to come out. And the woman who wrote the book, The Vegetarian Myth.
Oh yeah, I do know of her.
And it was fascinating. She stopped eating meat when she was 16, and then I think
many of them do.
18 years later, I think she nearly died. Now, called extreme, I don't know, it might be normal, but she was basing her decisions on ethics and essentially misinformation.
And that's the shame about it. Like I'm so for people making choices based on science, hard science. The statistic on the number of vegans and vegetarians that ultimately come back, whether it's because they get the right information or they literally get sick, 84%.
Fair dinkum.
So, before you make that decision, people, I can't imagine there's a lot listening to this show. Don't have a lot of fans in that world, even though I've got a lot of friends, because I live in Bondi.
We might convert a few. Share this episode with your vegan mates.
Yeah, I will. But I think the balance point, and I do want to close on it because I think guys like you and Joel Salatin and Matthew Evans are really doing things in a way where this isn't about you're wrong and we're right, because it's not that. And I said this to the Impossible guys, which again, I'll refrain. I genuinely thought they were good human beings. Yep. They were well-intentioned and good, and, they were definitely drinking the Kool-Aid. But we need to stop talking about plants versus animals and start talking about mono versus polyculture.
And I think it goes to the conversation about farmers. I try and avoid at all costs comparing what we do with what I used to do. I mean, I'm happy to criticise myself because that's easy, because I'm happy to talk about that. And I avoid criticising others that do what I do because that's not helpful. People get defensive straight away.
You are where you are.
Exactly right. And so I'm talking about moving on. The only person I compare myself is to my previous self, and so I talk about that. So whether it's about, as you say, it's about diet. Let's talk about the benefits. Let's talk about the environmental, the health, and the ethical benefits of sourcing meat that's grass-fed. And find, again, it gets back to people understanding where their food's from. Make those decisions based on, call it science, call it, objective measurement, whatever it happens to be, but just don't take it for what it is, and look at who's telling you.
And I think that's part of the problem, Charlie. All these very, very conflicted documentaries that come out, What the Health, Cowspiracy, Game Changers, which is the latest one, the again, just diabolical misrepresentation. I forget the guy's name. He's a UFC fighter that became a vegan, and they had a bunch, as I understand it, and again, anyone that wants to come and prove me wrong, but I heard this from a very, very reputable source, a bunch of world-class athletes that went on the vegan diet and were part of the initial filming of Game Changers, but got so sick and their performance deteriorated so drastically during it that they had to drop out.
They probably signed something to say they couldn't talk about it.
Oh, they couldn't talk about it, and then of course they weren't in the documentary. Sure. But if you want to present the stuff, then why not present that too? Because N=1 without doubt is the only true absolute in healthcare. But you can't be just cherry picking, which everyone seems to want to do, and grabbing epidemiological studies and all sorts of other largely misrepresented studies to prove a point, and in a really powerful and funded by some really big dollars, and influence people, much like we did with the food pyramid for a generation. There is going to be a generation of people that get on this plant-based movement to the detriment of themselves, to the detriment of the planet, and sadly to the detriment of animals too.
And I think we've got to be careful not to remain very objective as well, because we lose credibility. If we're debating, if we're putting our point forward, we have to apply.
We do so many things wrong, Charlie.
No, that's right, and I guess I like to think that I admit when we do get it wrong, and because and we can do that because we don't have the agenda. Look, I grow meat. totally. You know, I sell meat. Some might think that's an agenda to push meat. However, I understand. I'm a scientist in training, but I'm lots of other things. But I understand the benefit of meat in the diet. My wife was it's one of the reasons why I really went down the biodynamic part and path and the non-chemical. She was organic 20, 30 years ago before people were even buying that sort of stuff. So,
Amazing.
She understands and she educated me, and the only agenda I have is that I want to make sure people are as healthy as they possibly can be.
Yeah.
And in my way of doing that is providing clean, healthy, nutritious meat and educating people about practices like biodynamics and holistic management or whatever else, and just being open and honest. So, anyway, look, that's that, Paul.
It's a great way to finish, Charlie, and you're absolutely right. And it's not about being on a soapbox. It's literally about, please just question things,
And look, as I say, just put it on the table. This is what I do. This is what I've heard. This is what I've seen. That's there. You choose whoever you're talking to, or you're whatever situation you're in, and let them just have a look at it. Because I always say to farmers in that context, don't adopt, adapt.
Yeah.
Don't just do what I'm doing or read the book and go, I've got to do this. There's no formula. You've got to adapt.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's diet. And it's availability to food. It's what you need and your budget and all those things. So, if we can just start slowly dismantling the hurdles that people currently have in their heads, and that's really where it is.
Yeah.
About food choices and where it's from and who's growing it and why. Big picture, small picture. What's on my plate? What's happening to the planet? That's where we're gonna make up some ground.
Yeah, I think the only thing I will say is that if people are going to make radical choices about, particularly if it's a choice to become vegan, which again, whatever people want to do, it's their God-given right to do that. Yep. You need to find a really good functional medicine doctor and get blood work done. And I would say blood work done every quarter for the first couple of years you're doing it, because there's some real risk that you're missing some really important things, and there's some real risk that you're going to get sick in the long term from doing it. So just be scientific about it.
Make informed decisions. And it's a great point. Monitor what you're doing, because it really is experimental. I don't know there's many cultures on the planet that now or has been that are purely plant based.
Never.
A lot of people
not
say
multi-generational.
No, a lot of people say, but the gorillas just eat vegetables and leaves and stuff. It's like we're not gorillas. I know this is the thing. It's like, no, we are humans and we exist in an environment where there are plants and animals. We have incisor teeth for a reason. Some cultures, like Inuits, basically their whole diet was based around meat.
Yeah.
With a bit of moss here and there, So, and they did pretty well.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, as you say, I totally support people making informed decisions and monitor what you're doing, because as this woman in that vegetarian myth, she didn't. She just drank the Kool-Aid, and 18 years later nearly died. Complete reproductive failure after a couple of years. Lost weight, wasn't thinking properly. This is the other thing. When your diet's crap, you don't think properly. And then how do you recover from that? Anyway, we've solved a few problems.
We've solved a lot.
We might have created some more.
I think we created a few. We've solved a few, man.
Do we piss anyone off?
Oh, if we didn't, we're not trying hard enough. Thanks for coming
as I said to Anthony just out in the hallway there before, I said, as I go through life, I start understanding that if you don't have a few enemies, you're not having a go.
You're not having a go, man.
Good on you,
You
Paul.
got
Really
friends
enjoyed
here,
that,
brother. My pleasure.
I fucking enjoyed that.
Yeah, me too, man.
Good on you.
Over and out, buddy.